This episode, I'm joined by Peder Anker to discuss his book, The Power of the Periphery, How Norway Became an Environmental Pioneer for the World, alongside discussions on ecophilosophy, deep ecology, Arne and Zapfa. I'd like to say a big thank you to my paid patrons and subscribers for making all of this work possible, and if you'd like to support the podcast and keep everything running, please find links in the description below. Otherwise, please enjoy. So, Peder Anker, thanks very much for joining us on Hermitix podcast. We are going to be discussing your 2020 book, The Power of the Periphery, How Norway Became an Environmental Pioneer for the World, which was published by Cambridge University Press. And I don't know if you know this, but it's available for free online. I don't know if I should say this, but if you search it, I came across this book because I was searching for Zapfa and Arne, and then your book came up, and there it was, completely for free. I don't know if you want to restart the conversation because it was right there as a PDF and I was really surprised. Is this something you knew about?
First of all, thank you, James, for bringing me on your podcast, and it's an honor and a pleasure. And yes, I actually promoted the idea of putting the book out for free. This has to do with accessibility. I want everyone to be able to read my book. Books tend to be expensive, especially for students and for those of us who are not, on the upper side financially. So yes, it's there for free for everyone to read. And surprisingly, when people start reading it, they say, "Hey, this is interesting. I'm actually going to buy the book." So the sale of the book is actually going really well, which took me by surprise. So the book you can download for free. People that end up buying.
Well, it's a very accessible book, and it's very eclectic. I mean, it covers a lot of history, it covers a lot of philosophy and ecology. So, I mean, that's a good place to begin. It's just, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you wrote this book.
So I'm from Norway. My background is in his environmental ethics in Norway. That's kind of where I got my sort of training. Norway is, you can say amusingly, is a place of 9 months of snow and 3 months of rain. But it also is very beautiful, has amazing mountains and deep fjords and fantastic forests and so on. And we get millions of tourists every year to look at that. And these type of environments and places is kind of what I grew up with. And in philosophy, I studied with a set of people, amazing people, including Arne Næss, the deep ecology, and Sigmund Quale, and all these people that I write about in the books. In that sense, it is a personal book, though I have tried to keep my own sort of spiel in that at the minimum and be professional about it.
And Norway, I'm coming to find is that in a couple of places I've found just this comment about how Norway isn't usually very sort of they don't approach philosophy very often. It's not a very philosophical nation. I don't know how true this is, but ecology, something that you really bring forward this is where the environmentalism and what we understand to be deep ecology today, the roots of which are in Norway. And I think a good place to begin with this is it's, I guess, connected to the title of your book, but also you open the book with this, which is that Norway has this very specific understanding of what nature is. It has a very unique relationship to nature as a country.
Well, I think every nation and all kinds of people have unique relationship with the natural world, and in that sense, Norwegians are not unique, but given the accessibility of wild nature, if you like, or at least nature that looks wild, and the tradition of going outside life, outdoor life, is deep in Norway. It creates a sort of a culture or appreciation for the natural world. I think in Norway, over half of the population go for nature hikes longer than 3 hours, in their vacations, which is substantial compared to New York City, where I'm sitting right now. So a nature hikes here means outside, off road, if you like. on tracks up in the mountains and so on. The environment is sort of, you probably kind of, if you Google Norway, you will see it right away. There are high mountains and deep fjords and an ocean and a long coastline. And this, so in order to actually get around historically, you would have to walk a lot or sail. And so that it belongs to a deeper kind of historical tradition of how people would get along and get around in Norway.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so, does this have a relationship to the periphery, to your title of the book, "The Power of the Periphery"?
So, the periphery plays a sort of a double role in my books. So, the periphery, on one hand, is up in the mountains, out in the deep in the fjords, the way out places. And what I argue is that these places has sort of a mythical role of in Norway as the places of everything good. That's where the good things are, so to speak. And that when you start questioning the center, and that is the city or the town, you use that periphery to question the center. So with the knowledge of the purity or the good out in the natural world, you can sort of say, hey, we are not doing the right thing. Our place is polluted, and we need to sharpen up with that periphery in mind. But this all changes when Norwegians go abroad. So when Norwegians go abroad, they look upon the entire nation as a periphery in the global world, and the Norway as the pure, the good, the nice, the good place, while the rest of the world is polluted and in trouble in different ways. Because that's a sort of that dialogue between the periphery and the center from that is established in Norway, then becomes the dialogue of how people Norwegians will understand their role in a globalized world.
Is there any empirical truth to that in terms of, I guess, pollution and the defense of nature in Norway? Has it sort of retained its more natural elements? Has it retained its periphery, I guess?
So in a way, it used to be, I guess, that the natural world was unpolluted and pristine. Not anymore, as we know. We now live in the Anthropocene world in which there's pollution everywhere. There's plastic way up in the mountains. It comes with the rain. So we're living in a different type of world now. Though this is a history book, so in the historical nature that I'm writing about. Nature used to be that pristine place, but it's not anymore. So that also changes the way Norwegians will have to talk about the natural world.
Mm-hmm. And if I'm remembering correctly, there is right at the beginning as well in this Norwegian relationship with nature, there is some sort of not necessarily what we'd call centralized religious elements, but there are elements there which are perhaps a tad spiritual or something a bit different than the normal relationship to nature. Am I remembering that correctly?
I think, yes. Spirituality is difficult to sort of pinch down in precise words, but it's fairly normal for Norwegians walking around in the natural world to have, to see that world as a spiritual place. It doesn't mean that it's some sort of pantheism in which you believe God is in nature, and we shouldn't be too precise about this. But it means that it's fairly normal to see the natural world in a spiritual way. Thus, not going to church on a Sunday is completely fine because you're going to a nature hike, which kind of makes up for it. And in a secularized mood of argumentation. That becomes like the spiritual place for many Norwegians. Though, I have to be careful. You shouldn't generalize too much. There are always people who say, no, that's not me, and I'm Norwegian, and people from different backgrounds and so forth.
Do you? You've just said not to generalize, but I am immediately going to generalize, I guess. Do you feel that is something that is somewhat unique to Norwegian culture? From history, which sort of allowed this book to have the unique feel that it does. That this history that you're writing about, there's something unique about Norway's history, which has allowed figures like Arne Næss and this concept, the original concept of environmentalism, really to grow. There was something like a kernel or a corn there originally which allowed this, and it is perhaps that somewhat spiritual relationship with nature.
Well, I would like to think that is original, and in a way, it is for my readers to judge that. I mean, obviously, if you start comparing to other countries, that being Ghana or India or Britain or whatever, people will say, no, we do that too, and that's also part of our culture. And okay, fine, but from what I see, it's a strong element of Norwegian social life and spiritual life and ethical life to spend their time out in the open.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do you think the mountains played a big role for this? They seem to be the symbol of this environmentalism.
So, in a way, yes, and it's kind of surprising in the sense that Norway has a huge coastline with a lot of oceans and ocean life, and that has to do with that at least in philosophy, it so happened that mountain climbers, people part of the Alpine Club, they took a keen interest in philosophy through people like Zapfe and Ness and Kvalu and Forlund and many others. And they would focus on the mountains. Therefore, some of the philosophy, environmental philosophy coming out of Norway has a sort of a mountaineering, ring to it. There are very few, at least I haven't found that much of an ocean-based environmental ethic, with exception perhaps being Thor Heyerdahl, who's very focused on traveling by boats and sea boats as a way of connecting the world and so forth. He will be the exception to the rule.
Mm-hmm. So how does mountaineering allow us to have some let's say, an ethical relationship to the environment?
Well, when you are up in a mountain, especially a mountain with less vegetation, meaning no trees, you can get a nice overview. You can get a nice sort of vista. Weltanschauung is the German word here, right? It's both a vista for what you see, but it's also a way of seeing the world in terms of philosophy. And many of these philosophers, including Arnes, he would write his philosophy literally on top of a mountain. So it has that sort of mountaineering perspective in which you sit far away from society and reflect on society. You have that periphery, and then you use that periphery to empower yourself in terms of envisioning society.
So you say earlier on you said you worked with Arnes, or did I mishear you?
When I was a philosophy student, he had already retired and withdrawn a bit. But he was definitely around and had many conversations with him. And while I was at something called the Center for Development and Environment, he had his office just down the road. Just down the corridor. So we would have lunches together and these things. And I learned a lot from him. And then he was not only super intelligent and smart, but also inclusive and fun person to be around.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, there seems to be that sort of stark difference between the two figures that I'm most familiar with, and I think perhaps most people outside of who know of what we might call Norwegian philosophy, Arne Næss would be the biggest figure, and then less so Zapfe. Those are the two most, well-known figures in the Anglophone world. There seems to be this sort of perhaps a split between them. So Zapfe up in the mountains would look down on the pessimistic view of the world, and then perhaps Arne Næss is more, that what the German word you just mentioned, which I'm sorry I forgot it. But I mean, are you aligned with more of one side? If I was to split them like that, are you more of do you use the mountains for the pessimistic view, or are you more with Næss?
Well, these two were, had strong personalities. Zapfe was not lighthearted. He had a sort of a darker, perspective on life itself. And he wrote a book called On the Tragic. And he thought that we as human beings are a tragic species in the world, because we demand too much from it. So unlike, say, a tiger who would be satisfied with a kill and being part of a group, we are not satisfied with our intellect. So in that sense, we'll always demand more. We will never be satisfied. We will never feel the sense that we are now fully in reach the capacity of what it means to be humans. So thus we are a tragic species. And then on top of that, we are ruining the earth. So he would say, we better leave this earth, have no children, and die out as a species. That's the dignified way of living. And so he did himself. He had no children on purpose. Ness as a character was much more lighthearted and gleefully fun to be around. And that reflected in his philosophy too, that, yes, we do have a role to play in this world, and that's to take care of the world and take care of each other. So he would respond to his friend Sappho, with that. So those are the two sort of giants here, and, in philosophy, environmental philosophy. But we should add and this is what I found really, really fascinating, actually. We should add the students. Students here being particularly a guy called Sigmund Quale, who developed its own environmental philosophy, who was a student, and he was kind of a radical, interesting person, really kind of an activist, wanted to mobilize a philosophy, and his philosophy may not be as, so to speak, sophisticated or thought through and all these kind of things, but it provoked a lot of thoughts from Ness and Sappho and the others. He was the provocateur who challenged the professors to rethink their views. And he was the mobilizer who said, hey, come on, guys, we need to rethink our relationship with the natural world. So that is important. I mean, I'm a professor myself, and I think about my own students, the way they challenge me, and ask me to rethink the way I think about the world. And so Sigmund Quale was definitely one of those provocateurs who managed to force more consistent environmental philosophy out of his advisor, who was Ness. And that is important. I think academics are not always recognizing the force of students in their work and in their thinking. And if Ness or Quale was listening now, I hope they would agree with me that that Quale played that role.
What would Quale say we should do?
Oh, he had he was very much a Cold War warrior, in the sense that there are two ways to go. So during the Cold War, especially for younger listeners, there are two ways. Either you're a communist or you're a capitalist. Either you support, the imperial Soviets or the imperial colonialist America. And those were the two ways of being. And Quale wouldn't support any of those two forces. He wanted to try the middle way, but he framed it as either you are for the environment or you're against the environment. Either you want to live in a sort of self-sustained society with traditional agriculture and take care of the natural world, or you're part of the capitalist world of destroying the natural world. So it was this either-or type of philosophy, and in that way it was a bit simplistic. But it created the debate that he wanted. So people say, are you with me or against me? And he would focus on environmental conflicts that would nurture that distinction. So he would be, are you for or against a waterfall, hydropower development, right? And in that sense, it's like, should we build this dam or should we not build this dam? Should we industrialize this place or should we not industrialize this place? Those were the conflicts that he sought. And by doing so, he created a lot of activism. It was a waterfall in Mardøla, which is one of the fjords in Norway, and was up in Alta, which is up in the Sami region of Norway, in which he focused on this dam in order to kind of clinch a debate. And we see that in other places too, like in America. It's the BlackRock indigenous people are standing up to the pipeline. Either you're for or against the pipeline. It was the same type of the economy that he was doing. Ness was fascinated by this, but he wanted to give more nuance and create a richer philosophy of resistance against capitalism, I guess.
It's interesting though that history has pretty much remained either or. I mean, there hasn't been too much development in terms of perhaps a nuance. I mean, perhaps you could say sustainable technologies, but eventually they sort of overflow and you end up having a mass of whatever new technology it is. There's a certain difficulty there. I mean, is this in relation to the Ecophilosophy group that you write about?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was the Ecophilosophy group in Norway was in relationship doing this activism in relation to this dam and whether this either-or philosophy.
And this is very early. This is in 1970, 69, 70 is counterculture, and early in terms of international awareness around environmental ethics. Some of the first articles in environmental ethics comes out of this group. So in that sense, it was interesting. There might be other, people writing about it before, but this ecophilosophy group was on an international scale, as far as I can see, very original.
Were they successful?
Well, no. The world is, we have the sixth mass extinction. We have massive environmental problems. We can say, no, we are not in a sustainable society, etc. So clearly not successful from that point of view. But they were successful on a sort of mobilizing sense that we are sitting here talking about them. Mm-hmm. Not only we, I mean, there's tons of people around who are, studying what they did and their articles and their writings and so forth in order to try to muster some sort of resistance to the environmental problems we are facing.
Mm. And this is really historically sort of the birth of what we now know as deep ecology.
Yes.
And what's the difference, I guess, between ecology and deep ecology?
Ecology is a science. It's part of biology. And the ecologists were studying, mice and bushes and, being out there in the environment and trying to figure out how everything comes together. And they did that up in the pristine mountains of Norway. So they're part of that periphery. And they would create or imagine ecological harmonies up in the mountains. And the philosophers will latch onto that and say, hey, what you are studying here, the ecological relations that you see between the different species in the environment actually reflects the way we should live together with the natural world. So they would use that and get inspired from that by sort of articulating a larger philosophy of the environment. So in that sense, the philosophers and the ecologists are working together and walking together up around the mountain and then talking and learning from each other. So in that sense, it's an interesting sort of case of two different fields, philosophy and ecology as a biology, part of biology, bridging each other. It's like two different cultures, humanities were bridging with the scientists.
Mm-hmm. And then within that, one thing you point out is there slowly sort of develops critique of the strictly scientific perspective, because does that become a bit too quantified, a bit too sort of, it always perhaps would fall on the side of the capitalist, like logic of production, as opposed to having some more of a symbiotic relationship with nature as, something that's embedded within it?
Sure. Many of these people, including Arne Næss, were very skeptical towards the field of older scientists. They say, they are too linked up with industry and with capitalism and with destruction of the earth, chemistry in particular, but also physics with nuclear, bombs and production of nuclear energy. So they were very, very skeptical and they were so radical as thinking that ecology could be the only science worth really studying. In that sense, they were challenging the other fields. Geologists were just around the corner, and they were only interested in finding oil, right, and petroleum industry. So they were like, geology is a hopeless field. So it was a strong critique of the science community, and with all criticism, some of it is valid and some of it is not valid. We can sort of look in retrospect, but it started a process of self-questioning within the scientific community, which was healthy.
Do you think we've made some headway towards a productive, in terms of the environment, synthesis between these two viewpoints, like I guess towards a practical deep ecology? Or do you think perhaps we're still, maybe this is probably where I'd fall, is that we're still lying about the fact that actually we are far more heavily leaning towards the capitalist side, even though we like to pretend otherwise? That's my own view.
I have a very dark view on this. I don't think we are. I don't think we're heading in any good direction. Though there are voices of opposition, but no, we are. It's pretty bleak. It should also be noted that the word deep ecology doesn't sound good in the sense that it sounds like someone is shallow and they are deep. Someone is thought deeper than others. There's, of course, this sense of power of the periphery here. We are deep and you guys are shallow. Ness and Kvala and the others, they didn't like that. They insisted on using the word ecophilosophy or environmental ethics as better terms. But somehow it stuck in the academic world to call them deep ecologists, and it really just meant deeper questioning of society.
So, in terms of your own pessimistic view of the future, what do you think we could learn from the eco-philosophists to perhaps, in some utopian sense, have it to be not such a pessimistic future? Or do you think there really is no possibility?
So at the heart of deep ecology was the idea to recognize other living things, other living species than humans, and try to identify with them and ask yourself, how is this plant doing? How is this environment doing? How is this ocean doing? And really try to sort of get beyond the human-centered view of things. That is what they try to do. And I think that has value, no matter what's happening. It's always value to sort of look around and ask yourself, how is the environment around us doing? How can we do better? Regardless of how the world is going. It's a meaningful act. I don't know if you're familiar with the Greek myth of Sisyphus. Sisyphus was condemned by the gods to hell, and there he would have to push a stone up the mountain, and then the stone would fall down again. And I think that story it's interesting in the sense that we don't really know why we have been condemned to this sort of environmental, hell, if you like. But every day we try to push that stone up the mountain. That is the periphery, right? And then it would go down again, and we try again, and we find that, at least I find it deeply meaningful. In the sense that constantly trying to do the best and do your thing, even though you may not succeed, or perhaps even know that you will not succeed. So that's one way of being optimistic or having a positive outlook in a dark world. I mean, we're living in a mass extinction. I have no hope about, with stopping the climate, the rise of the temperatures, probably go up to 3 degrees. It's going to be a lot of havoc. It's already a lot of havoc with rains and fires and so on. But in the midst of this, we need to kind of try to keep a positive outlook around us.
So as an environmental, teaching environmental ethics, amidst all this, even with your pessimistic outlook, which I'm in agreement with, what is it to be ethical in that sense? Is it just to keep trying?
Yeah, just to keep pushing that stone up the mountain, which in itself makes your life meaningful. I'll give you an example. It's, you go there in an environment and you see some pollution, some piece of paper or chocolate paper or something that is in the path, and you pick it up because you think that shouldn't be there. That plastic bottle shouldn't be there on the road, and you pick it up and you put it in the garbage can. You know very well that next day there will be more garbage coming there, right? That this is not going to clean up the world, but yet you find it meaningful to do so. So that's like a way of thinking that it's a constant sort of cleanup process that we need to be engaged with.
What do you think Zapffer would make of that outlook?
Well, he will certainly agree with my dark, pessimistic outlook. And Ness would like the idea that, you constantly have to pick up that garbage and take care of the earth around you. So there's a compromise between the two of them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What is the legacy of the Ecophilosophy group today? I mean, is it not really known as a group, but perhaps there's little bits relating to singular thinkers, or do you think there maybe should be a renaissance? I mean, is it still existing? That bit of ignorance on my part there, is it still around, or?
Well, in philosophy departments and students, their articles are still being studied and thought and discussed. And on the larger issue, environmental ethics is something that more and more people take an interest in. I think the legacies, though, are, they wander around in the sense that, for instance, the whole idea of sustainability comes out of this debate. That's one of my surprises I found in the book, that the word sustainability and the debates about sustainability harbors back to these debates in the 70s through the work of Gro Harlem Brundtland, was the Prime Minister of Norway and the chair of the World Commission that sort of launched that idea of sustainability. So, and lots of people that are talking about sustainability, right? It's a buzzword that is much used. So in that sense, it survives without people, being aware of its historical background.
Mm-hmm. So your book acts as a window into really a lot of the language that we take for granted now in terms of how we are to comport ourselves going into the future. Your book is a window into the history of the roots of that language.
It's a window into it. Thank you. I would like to see it as a window into our current affairs. So we walk around with a lot of ideas like sustainability and treat animals, fairly and nicely and so forth. And not to mention climate change, and how come are we addressing the issues the way we do, and where are these words coming from, or where are these ideas coming from, and practices coming from, and that's what I try to trace back in history.
Mm-hmm. So, just going back to the notion of the future, because that's what everyone's thinking about in terms of these ideas now. Your own view is very pessimistic, and Zapf's view was very pessimistic. What did Arne Næss see, and what did the rest of perhaps the eco-philosophy groups see as potential futures? Or were they all pessimistic?
Well, Waller saw it as you have to make a choice. You're going to live in this world or that world. And it was an existential choice, inspired by existentialism in a bit. Sartre, the French philosopher, and so on. You have to make a choice. So he would probably say, hey, come and join the green side, make a life choice. Sapfer would, he would agree with that and say we should leave this earth, we shouldn't ruin it while doing so. We should leave it alone, and we should die it out as a species. I tend not to agree with him there. I think it's okay to have children. I have children myself. While Næss was more interested in the way we look upon the natural world and treat the natural world on a larger scale, but also on a very small scale. How do we, when you see a leaf on the ground, how do we see that leaf kind of on a very, very particular level? And how can we celebrate or engage with in a positive way the world we see around us?
Okay, those are all different futures. I mean, but perhaps I'll ask you a question which might seem almost ridiculous, just in terms of, this idea, finishing there, you said about you see a leaf on the ground, this notion of having a relationship with that. Why should we care about nature? Because there's a lot perhaps taken for granted these days about having this relationship. Mm-hmm. And perhaps this question, I don't know, it's sort of, taken for granted. Why should we care about the tree or the ocean or the mountains?
Well, because it enriches your life. Your life will be better if you care about the world around you. It's the same questions like why should you care about your loved ones or your family or your office mates? Why should you care about the people around you? Mm-hmm. Well, if you do, your life will be better. You will have a richer life, and more fun life. And by extension, if you start caring about the natural world around you, you will have a richer life. Your life will be better if you start noticing the wonders of the world around you. So in that sense, it's a call for enrichment, mm-hmm. Or what they call a deeper sense of enrichment of the life around you. It's self-oriented, right? In that sense, but it's like enlarging your sense of community.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, gone through all the questions that I had very, very quickly. I mean, is there any other aspects of the book that you'd like to comment on, or anything about it that you'd like to add in that you feel is key about your book that you feel we haven't touched on?
So yes, there's a paradox in Norway that needs to be addressed. So on the one hand, you have these kind of environmental, philosophies and environmental, people who care about the earth. But Norway is also an oil-producing nation, and one of the worst nations in terms of, environmental impacts from oil and gas and petroleum. There's a lot of other harms that's going on in the fishing industry, in farming, and so forth. So I think it needs to be said that despite all these environmental thinking, that did not lead Norway into sort of a sustainable path, and nobody should leave this postcat thinking that Norway is such a gem of environmental friendliness. There's a paradox, and there's a tension, just like there are tensions like that in every country, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Why do you think people can't see that paradox? Are we just willfully ignorant? We don't want to see. We want to have our cake and eat it too.
I think in Norway, people can live a double lives. They can go up in the mountains and they can be, environmentalists on a Sunday, so to speak. And then they, go down in the valley or down to the city again. And then they, continue a type of lifestyle, which is, unsustainable, including, oil and petroleum. And people are afraid of their jobs too. To recognize that, the workforce and the money coming out of oil and petroleum is huge in Norway.
Mm-hmm.
So people are afraid of losing that income.
But we won't be able to live this double life for too much longer.
Yeah, I guess we will sort of, I don't think Norway will be the suffering country here. You have all the money, you have all the, a lot of resources and so forth. The suffering we see in again, in the global south, again, in a more country with less resources, in fires and water, slides and all these things that's going on. So I think we need to think hard about solidarity with those regions of the world that are really suffering from climate change and from the sixth mass extinction of species.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, we've covered a lot with your book. I mean, are you currently working on another book on climate change or Norway-focused ecophilosophy? Or?
No, right now I'm writing about biodesign. So how to design with the natural world, tree houses and furniture built with that is building itself through mushrooms and rice cakes. And I'm trying to sort of find and fashion growing your own jackets and hats. And I'm trying to kind of find a more humorous and interesting ways of engaging the natural world in a sustainable way. I think it's really important not to be a moralist. I think, and listeners listening in, they will say, I don't like moralists. I don't like people saying you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. I would love to develop a mood of thinking that is more inclusive and humorous and hopeful, because I think people latch onto that in a better way, and then your life will be good.
Mm. So have you built much yourself out of? I'm intrigued that you grow a chair out of mushrooms. You said, or grow a jacket.
You can grow a jacket in the laboratory of leather. Your new leather jacket can be grown in a laboratory. Yes, that is possible. It's fantastically expensive and difficult, but one day it will happen. You can grow shoes in the grass. You can do all kind of strange and wonderful things. Mushroom hats and so forth. And we will see the world of fashion changing. We'll see the whole way we think about furniture and architecture to change around biodesign. And it will make our world hopefully better and more fun and more interesting. it's it's like the Tesla phenomena. As soon as you had a beautiful car that was electric, people will start buying it. And I think also the same with all the other products we are surrounded with. As soon as it's beautiful and cool and interesting, people will start buying it, and people will change their habits.
Mm-hmm. I would buy a mushroom hat. I would buy a mushroom hat.
It would look beautiful on you, James.
So your work can be found. It's just your name.com, I believe.
It's Peder Anker, PEDERANKER.com.
And all your work can be found on there. And I'll be sure to put the link for The Power of the Periphery, the PDF, accessible PDF, in the links below. But yeah, this has been a fantastic conversation. Peder Anker, thanks very much.
Thank you so much for including me, and thank you to all the listeners for listening in.